roads were paved, before the white man's school swallowed our children's tongues, before electricity frightened away the fireflies, there existed a village so proud, so ancient, so deeply woven into the fabric of the earth, that even the clouds bowed low when they passed over its hills. The village was called Umezemmiri, children of the Water King. It sat at the edge of the great river, Oguta Ocha, a river so wide, so dark, so impossibly deep that the elders said it had no bottom. It swallowed canoes whole. It breathed at night. Fishermen who went too far into his heart never came back, but their nets would return, emptied and folded, placed neatly at the riverbank, as if by careful hands. The people of Umezemmiri did not fear the river. They respected it. They knew what lived beneath. They called her Odinumiri, Queen of the Waters. They said she was neither good nor evil. She was simply power. Ancient and watching, she collected depths the way rain collects clay pots, slowly, patiently, until they overflow. Center of the village stood the palace of Igwe Chukwuemeka Obieze. Chukwuemeka, whose name meant God has done great things, and indeed, God had. He was as tall as an iroko tree, fierce-eyed as a hawk, and wise enough to know that the two most dangerous things in the world were a hungry man and an unanswered prayer. Igwe Chukwuemeka had ruled Umezemmiri for 22 years. He had defeated neighboring clans, settled land disputes that stretched back 4 generations, and brought the village through a drought that killed every mango tree for miles. He was feared. He was loved. He was legend while still breathing. But there was one wound in his chest that no title could heal, no palm wine could numb, no praise singer could dance away. He had no child. 22 years of kingship, 3 wives, and not a single child to call his name after he was gone. His first wife, Adaeze Nwachukwu, had given him 2 pregnancies. Both ended in silence and blood. His second wife, Ngozi Okafor, had given him a son who breathed for 3 days and then returned to wherever souls come from. His third wife, the youngest, the most beautiful, the one the entire village whispered about, was Chioma Obi. Chioma was not from Umezemmiri. She was from a distant village called Ogugwala, where the women were said to have eyes like deep wells and voices that could make the harmattan wind pause mid-blow. She had come to Umezemmiri as a young woman, selling clay pots at the market, and Igwe Chukwuemeka had seen her once, just once, and sent his messengers the very next morning with kola nuts and palm wine and a dowry that made her father weep with gratitude. Chioma was gentle. Chioma was quiet. Chioma was the kind of woman who swept a room before anyone noticed it was dirty, who placed food before you were hungry, who smiled at you when you didn't even know you needed a smile. The village loved her. Even the first and second wives, who had every reason to despise her, could not help but soften in her presence. But Chioma had a secret so deep, so buried, so carefully hidden beneath her gentle smiles and quiet prayers, that even she sometimes pretended it wasn't real. She made a promise to Odinumiri. It happened 3 years before Chioma became queen. She had been 17 and desperate. Her mother was dying of a sickness that had no name, that ate her from the inside like termites eat wood, that had reduced a once proud woman to a collection of bones wrapped in skin. The herbalists had come and gone. The Dibia had thrown his shells 17 times and found no answer. The Christian pastor her uncle had brought from the city had prayed until his voice left him. Nothing worked. One night, alone and sleepless, Chioma walked to the river. Not a village river. She walked to Oguta, 3 miles through the bush, barefoot, following a sound that only she could hear. A low hum, like a song being sung underwater. She stood at the bank. The river was black and silver in the moonlight, and then the water parted. Not dramatically, not like a flood or a wave, it simply moved. Like a curtain being pulled aside, and from that parted water rose a figure that Chioma could never fully describe afterward. Not because she forgot, but because some things once seen refused to be put into human words. What she knew was this: the figure was beautiful, ageless. Her skin was the color of deep water at dusk. Her hair moved like river grass, even though there was no current. Her eyes were the color of the sky just before lighting. She spoke without moving her lips. "What will you give me, daughter of Ogugwala, in exchange for your mother's life?" Chioma should have run. Who should have fallen to the ground and begged for mercy? Instead, stood very still and said, "What do you want?" The queen of the waters smiled, and that smile was the most terrifying and beautiful thing Chioma had ever seen. "I want what you will have," she said. "Not your first, not your last, your middle, the one bound in between. That belongs to me." Chioma did not understand. She was 17 and not yet married, the middle child of a future she couldn't see, but her mother was dying. "Yes," she said. "Yes," the river echoed. Her mother recovered by morning. Chioma married Igwe Chukwuemeka at 19. She forgot the river's words the way you forget a bad dream, imperfectly, with pieces still clinging. She told herself it had been a hallucination, a grief-fevered vision. She told herself this very day, until the day she found out she was pregnant. When the royal herbalist, old Dibia Nzeokolo, pressed his ancient hands against Chioma's swollen belly and closed his eyes for a long, silent moment, the entire palace held its breath. He had done this with the first queen and the second. Each time he had opened his eyes and said nothing, which meant there was nothing to say. But this time something changed in his face. His brow furrowed, his hands pressed deeper as if feeling for something that kept moving. His lips moved in silent words, then his eyes opened and they were wide. "Igwe," he said, his voice careful as a man walking a bridge made of old wood. "The child is, the children are strong." The king leaned forward. "Children?" Old Nzeokolo hesitated, just a fraction of a second, barely enough for anyone to notice, but Chioma noticed. Her blood turned cold. "It is a strong pregnancy," the old man said, adjusting his words like a man straightening a crooked fence. "I see great life force. The child will be a boy, the year Umeze Miri has waited for." The village erupted. For 3 days, drums did not stop. Palm wine flowed like the river itself. Women danced until their feet bled. Men slaughtered goats. The praise singers composed new songs on the spot, songs that would be sung for generations. Even the sky cooperated. The rain that had been threatening for a week suddenly withdrew, and the sun came out golden and generous. Chioma smiled through all of it, but at night, when the palace was quiet and the king slept with the deep, satisfied sleep of a man who believed his dynasty was secured, Choma laid awake with her hands on her belly, feeling the two heartbeats, because she had known since the 4th month, when the movement inside her were too different, too distinct, too dual to be one child. She knew the way every mother knows the truth about what she carries. In her bones, in her blood, in the place below thoughts where the body speaks its own language. Twins. She was carrying twins. And in Umezemiri, twins were Ojojo, an abomination, a curse, a sign that a woman had been visited by evil spirits, that the blood was contaminated, that something in the order of the world had broken. The tradition was clear, handed down from the ancestors without negotiation. Twin children could not live in the village. Both had to be taken to the evil forest, Ohiaojo, and left there at dawn while the world was still dark enough to forgive terrible things. Some villages had begun to change this tradition. Some have heard the white man's arguments against it and had quietly, shamefully let the old law fade. But not Umezemiri, not under Igwe Chukwuemeka, who believed that the strength of a people lived in the faithfulness with which they honored their ancestors. Choma laid in the dark and did the math of her desperation. If she told the king, both children would be taken to the forest. If she said nothing and the truth was discovered, she would be disgraced or worse. But the old Dibia knew or suspected. She had one advantage. She knew things the Dibia did not know. She knew about the river. She knew about the promise she had made. And she began. God forgive her. God have mercy on her terrified and cornered heart. She began to plan. The bird came on a Tuesday. Not a day chosen by Choma, but a day the babies chose for themselves, arriving 3 weeks early, in the deep black of a moonless night, when the palace guards were half asleep and the world was as quiet as a health breath. The midwife was old Mama Uju, who had delivered every royal child for 40 years, whose hands knew the shape of birth the way a musician knows the shape of a song. She was the only one in the room besides Choma. The king had been sent away. Tradition demanded it. The first child came easily, a boy, loud and angry, with the king's strong jaw and his mother's long fingers. Mama Uju caught him, wiped him, wrapped him, and placed him in the waiting cloth with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had done this 1,000 times. She turned back to Choma and stopped because the labor was not done. Mama Uju's face went through a story in about 3 seconds. Confusion, then realization, then a horror so complete it aged her 5 years in the span of a breath. Choma! I know, Choma said through her teeth, still in the grip of labor. Say nothing, do nothing until it is done. The second child came 15 minutes later. A girl, smaller than her brother, quieter, but when she breathed her first breath and opened her eyes, and newborns are not supposed to focus their eyes, they're not supposed to see anything, she looked directly at her mother. And Choma, who had prepared herself for this moment for months, who had rehearsed her coldness, who had told herself it was necessary, who had promised herself she would not feel it, she felt it. Like a spear through the chest, the love came without permission, without warning, violent and total and completely unhelpful. The baby girl had her father's eyes, deep brown, steady, ancient looking. She made no sound. She simply looked at her mother as if she already understood everything, as if she had come into this world preloaded with a grief she had agreed to carry. Mama Uju's hands were shaking. Choma, we must, the tradition. Cover the boy. Choma said. Her voice was steady in a way that cost her everything. Tell the king he has a son, a healthy son. Tell him the birth was difficult. Tell him I need to rest. Tell him I will receive him in the morning. But the girl is mine to deal with. Mama Ojo was not a foolish woman. She had lived long enough to understand that there are moments in life when wisdom means looking away. She wrapped the boy, she cleaned the room, she stepped outside to tell the waiting palace that the king had an ear. The celebrations that erupted outside were so loud that no one heard the sound of a young queen weeping. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when even the 9 birds had gone quiet, Choma rose from her bed. Her body was in ruins from childbirth. Every step was pain, but she wrapped her daughter against her chest, covered herself in a plain cloth, nothing royal, nothing identifiable, and slipped out of the palace through the kitchen passage that only the house girls used. The night was absolute dark, the kind of dark that swallows you. She walked to the river. With every step, she bargained with God. Let there be another way. Let me wake up. Let this be a dream. Let the river refuse her. Let something stop me. Nothing stopped her. She reached the river of Oguta Ocha. The water was black and still. She stood there for a long time, holding her daughter, pressing the small warm weight of her against her chest, memorizing the smell of her, that new child smell, milk and earth and something impossibly clean. I cannot do this, she whispered. You already did, the river answered. The water moved, the same pattern she remembered from 5 years ago, the same underwater light, the same figure rising. But this time, Odinu Miri was not alone. She was surrounded by women, water women, river daughters, beings that shimmered like light on currents. They stood in the dark water looking at Choma with expressions she could not read. You kept your promise, the Queen of Waters said. I keep mine. Give me the child. She's my daughter, Choma said. Her voice broke on the last word. She's also mine, the Queen said. She was mine before she was born. You agreed. Will she be safe? She will be more than safe. She will be extraordinary. Will she know she has a brother, a father? Will she know? She will know everything when the time is right. Choma looked down at her daughter one final time. The baby was awake. Still that unnatural stillness. Still those Asian eyes. Forgive me, Choma whispered against the forehead. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me. She placed the child on the water, and the water did not let her sink. Instead, the river received her gently, the way you receive something precious, the way you catch something you have been waiting for. The water women gathered close, the light beneath brightened, and the Queen of Waters took the child and descended, and the river closed above them like a curtain, and the night returned to its ordinary darkness. Choma stood at the river bank until her legs gave out. She sat in the mud and wept until there was nothing left to weep. Then she rose, wiped her face, straightened her clothes, and walked back to the palace. She had a son to raise, she had a king to face, she had a secret to keep. They named the boy Chukwuebuka Obieze. God is great, son of Obieze, but everyone called him Emeka. And Emeka was, by any measure, everything a royal family could want. He was beautiful in the way that people stop mid-sentence when you walk into a room. He had his father's frame, broad-shouldered, naturally commanding, the kind of body that wears authority like a well-fitted cloth. He had his mother's eyes, warm and perceptive, the kind of eyes that make people feel seen even in a crowd. He was kind. This was the thing that surprised people most. King's sons were not supposed to be kind. They were supposed to be strong, which in most people's understanding meant hard. But Emeka was kind with the easy naturalness of someone who had never been taught to perform it. He shared his food with palace servants. He sat with old men and listened to their stories for hours. He learned the names of every farmer, every trader, every child in the village. The people of Umezemiri loved him the way dry earth loves rain, desperately, gratefully, as if they had been waiting for him all along. His father, Igwe Chukwuemeka, watched his son grow with a pride so enormous it was almost pain. Every year of Emeka's life was a year of healing for the dynasty, for the village, for a king who has spent 20 years fearing that his name would die with him. His trauma watched Emeka with love. Yes, fierce, devoted, sacrificial love, but also with a guilt that never fully left her eyes. A distance she kept between herself and complete joy, as if she believed she did not deserve it. The village women noticed and said she was simply a reserved woman, a serious woman. The palace maids noticed and said nothing, because palace maids learn early that noticing too much is dangerous. Only old Mama Oju knew. And Mama Oju, who had looked away that night and would look away until her grave, lived with her own version of the guilt. She died when Emeka was 12, and on her deathbed, she held Choma's hand and said, "I hope the river is kind to her." Choma had not slept well since. Emeka grew. He trained in wrestling and came second only to boys 3 years older. He trained in oratory and could move a crowd to tears with a speech. By the time he was 15, he trained in governance, sitting beside his father in council meetings, listening, asking questions that were sharper and more precise than men twice his age could manage. The seer, Dibia Nzeokolo's successor, a younger man called Amadieze, declared officially at Emeka's 16th birthday that the prince would be the greatest king Umezemiri had ever known. The village celebrated for a week. Choma smiled throughout. At night, she dreamed of dark water. Emeka was 19 years old when it began. It started small, the way terrible things always start, small enough to dismiss, ordinary enough to explain away. He woke one morning complaining of a headache. No one worried. Princes got headaches. The palace herbalist gave him a mixture of bitter leaf and ginger and sent him back to bed. But the headache did not leave. It settled behind his eyes like a tenant who had no intention of leaving. 3 days became a week became a month, and then the headache brought company. Fever arrived first, not the clean, dramatic fever of malaria that burns high and fast, but a slow, persistent heat, like embers that refuse to die. Then came the exhaustion, not tiredness, exhaustion, the kind that lives in your bones, that makes the act of rising from bed feel like lifting a mountain. Then came the dreams. The dreams were the worst parts. Emeka dreamed every night, not ordinary dreams, vivid, architectural, impossible to shake off in the morning. He dreamed of water, always water, dark, deep water, lit from below by a light he could not identify. He dreamed of a girl his age, with his mother's eyes, who stood just below the surface and looked up at him through the glass of the water and pressed a palm against it. He always tried to reach her. He always woke up before his hand touched the water. "Who is she?" he asked his mother one morning, when the dreams had been happening for 3 weeks and the question had grown too heavy to carry alone. Choma's face did something complicated. "Who is who?" the girl in my dreams. She looks like... He stopped, studied his mother's face. She looks like you. Younger, but like you. It is just a dream, Choma said, and smiled and turned away. Emeka watched his mother's back and felt for the first time in his life that she was hiding something. He filed it away. The sickness deepened. By the second month, Emeka could no longer attend council meetings. By the third month, he could not ride his horse. By the fourth month, the palace doctors, 3 of them, summoned from 3 different cities, stood around his bed and exchanged looks over his body that told Choma everything she needed to know without them saying a word. They did not know what was wrong, they did not know how to fix it, and he was getting worse. My people, something is not right. A prince that was once strong is now fading before everyone's eyes. A sickness no one can explain. Dreams no one can understand, and a secret that has been buried for 19 years. But tell me, is Emeka really dying, or is something calling him from somewhere deeper? Part 2 will reveal the truth, and trust me, you're not ready for what is coming. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and drop a comment below. What lesson stood out the most to you from this story? Please share in the comment section. Until next time, this is Timeless Tales by IBK, where stories live forever.